Hey folks, Max from Abstract Automation here. So today I'm going to talk about one of the most common mistakes that I see companies make when they deploy Zoho CRM or any CRM for that matter, when it comes to tracking sales activity of their sales team. And the biggest issue that I see is that there is no specific process defined for that sales team to follow when they're doing their sales activities. So when they're making follow-up calls, when they're having conversations with clients, when they're creating quotes, creating opportunities or deals in the system, they're doing all these things and they are not following a routine process, either individually on a per person basis and definitely not on a per team basis. And so what happens is down the road, after the system is used for some time and management finally decides that maybe they want to start tracking productivity and running some reports and getting some dashboards on sales activity, and they realize that because of the haphazard way the information has been getting entered into the CRM, they are not going to be able to get the reports and dashboards and information out of the system that they're looking for. So what I want to talk about in this video is just how to avoid the most common pitfalls to set up a fairly basic standardized recording of how to categorize the sales activity. And then this can be built on over time and improved and becomes more specific based on your individual company's needs. And at the end, you'll be much happier with the system you have than if you didn't go through this effort early on in the beginning. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so here are a few of the mistakes that I see companies make. So they do train their users on how to use the CRM. So for example, they show the users how to add a note to a company record or customer record, how to create a task, how to log a phone call. They show them how to do those things in the system by clicking buttons and entering information in fields, but they don't explain exactly which one of those options they should be using during particular activities. And they also don't create custom categories for these areas so that the information is reportable in the future. So first, let me talk about notes in the CRM. So everybody knows that whenever we're looking at any record in the CRM, there's a notes section along the left-hand side. So here we're looking at a demo account, a customer in the system, and we've got a notes area over here at the top, right? If I'm a salesperson, I might have a conversation with this customer and I may choose to key in a note about the conversation and then save that note. And I can always refer back to that note at a later point in the future. The problem with just using notes like that and keying in a note every time there's a conversation or interaction with the customer is those notes are, number one, they kind of get buried. You know, if you're adding dozens of notes to the same customer, over time, you'll just get this big list of notes and they're quite sort of tall and you can only see a few at the same time. And so you're just going to be scrolling through a lot of notes. That's one of the problems. The second problem is there's no category to assign to a note or any other attributes to the note aside from the actual note text, the title of the note, and who created and when the note was entered. So we can't sort of designate a note as being, say, a follow-up call or specifically a delivery of a quote or something along those lines. Those are very specific actions that salespeople take on a daily basis. And if we don't have a specific field that we're categorizing that note with, which we can't in a note, you're not going to be able to get any sort of metrics or anything out of the database to tell you, how many follow-ups is it generally taking from start to close, or how many quotes have we delivered this month or this week, and that sort of thing. So that's one problem. Very similar issue with logging calls in Zoho CRM. So phone calls in Zoho CRM are another activity type, and I have to tell you, more often than not, I recommend my clients simply hide the calls module completely. Okay, I would much rather see people use the tasks module, even when reminding themselves to make a phone call or logging the fact that they made a phone call. I prefer to use tasks for that purpose. And then this way, the tasks module becomes your single go-to place for almost all sales activity. And this way you can categorize those tasks as, outbound follow-up call or outbound follow-up email, whatever you want to mark those tasks with as far as a category, you will be much better equipped for reporting down the road if you use tasks instead of the phone calls module. The only scenario that I think the phone calls module does make sense is if you have somebody that's in what you would traditionally think of as a true telemarketer type of role, right? Where you have somebody where they're just cold calling down a big list of records one after another. They want to just do a click to dial, have that automatic pop-up window come up with a quick note that they can key in with the outcome of the conversation or whether the phone call was answered or not answered. Outside of that scenario, I think the phone calls module should just be hidden and push users towards using tasks instead. So regarding tasks, what are a few things we can do in the tasks module to make the salespeople's lives easier? Let's take a look here. If we go over to our setup of the tasks module, the big advantage that the task module has is that it can be customized. So here's the field layout of the task module. It has an owner assigned, the subject of the task, a due date, what company or contact the task is related to, and a few other fields here along with a description box, which is kind of like a notes box under the task. Now, one of the first things I suggest companies think about when it comes to the task module is the subject field. What's a little unique about the subject field under tasks is it is a sort of hybrid field, a combination of a free text entry as well as a pick list field. This is totally unique inside of Zoho CRM. It's literally the only field I can think of off the top of my head that has or that works this way. Most fields in Zoho CRM are either a drop-down pick list field where you can't type whatever you want into that field. You must pick something from the list, or it's totally a free entry text field that has no pick list. This is sort of the rare case where it's a hybrid of those two things. So the system will let us type anything we want into the subject of a task. However, it also has a pick list here that you can edit. Now, what I recommend is kind of ignoring the fact that there's a pick list here, because if the user is given the option to type whatever they want into a field, then we have no way of policing that. They're just going to do it, and then they're going to fall into bad habits, and we're not going to get the categories that we want when we're looking to write a report or run some automations or dashboards. So what I suggest is you create a custom field that's a true pick list field and call it something like task type or sales activity type or something like that. We'll call it task type. And then your pick list options might be something like, I've got a little list here that I put together on my clipboard. Something like this, right? This task is either prospecting or cold outreach, follow-up call, follow-up email, discovery, demo or presentation, proposal, quote, contract negotiating, whatever. You come up with your own categories. And we make this a pick list field. We get rid of these two generic option 1, option 2. And this field we make required. Okay. Now that brings up the point of, well, now what do we do with the subject field, right? Because the subject field is a required field, and we can't change that because it's a stock field in Zoho CRM, and it's kind of has that as a built-in attribute that it's mandatory. So something that I'm not really going to cover in this video, but a very common thing that we might do is build a little bit of an automation where when the user creates the task and they select the task type, it will automatically fill the subject with a copy of that task type text, okay? Just so that the user doesn't have to do dual entry. Now, we may allow the user to override that after the text has been filled in and put whatever they want in the subject line, but at least we're not forcing that dual entry. You know, salespeople, we don't want to make their lives harder. We want to make their lives easier. That's the whole point of the CRM. So there's a few ways you can get around the that issue with the subject line. So now we have a task type that has some sort of categorization, and we will save and close this field layout. So now if we go to our tasks module and we go to create a new task, you'll see that here's our new field task type, which we can select and pick from our list. I don't have the automation in place here on my demonstration, but what we would see is this box here would autofill with follow-up call. Okay, spell that right. So our automation would be salesperson picks the task type, subject automatically gets filled. They can overwrite or type whatever they want in there. We don't care. Let them do whatever they want with that subject field for their own personal preference or whatever, because at the end of the day, a manager or the owner of the company is going to be able to get what they need out of reporting from this task type field. All right. So one other important aspect going down this route is you need to make sure that the team is using these tasks and these options consistently from one salesperson to the next. In other words, the pick list that you see in this drop down to select the type of task, you need to make sure that everybody on the team is on the same page as far as what these terms mean and when they are appropriate depending on the sales activity that they're doing. They need to understand the difference between a discovery call and a cold prospecting call, for example, okay? So it's your job as the manager, as the business owner, to make sure that your team understands these terms and the lingo, make sure everybody's on the same page, and make sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to be entering into the system. Now, another nice thing that we can do with tasks is the system has a lot of automation capability when it comes to tasks. So as opposed to notes and as opposed to phone calls, the tasks module has the most capable automation of any of the activity areas or notes areas. So for example, one thing we can do is we can create an automation that says, let's say they complete this task and the task type is a follow-up call. We can add another field in here, sort of like an outcome field, right? Whether that follow-up was successful or unsuccessful, or maybe there was no answer, no response, or maybe there was a positive conversation, right? So you create another custom field, call it something like task outcome, and you'd create another pick list of standardized options, which could be all the possible outcomes of that task, of that communication with the customer. And then what we can do is we can build automation off of that. So let's say if the follow-up call was completed and there was no answer or the call was unsuccessful, we might automate the creation of another open task in 1 week's time, right? So the salesperson, all they have to do is open that task, make their phone call, and then click the complete or close button, and then automatically that task will pop back up on their to-do list in 1 week's time. So these are the kinds of things that you really have to think about as a manager or as a business owner. These are not things that the CRM just automatically does. You know, I think there's a big assumption out there that all we have to do is buy a good CRM and then give it to our users, and then things just take care of themselves. That's not really how it works. What you'll end up with is basically a whole bunch of tools in a toolbox that nobody knows how to use. So I hope this video helps a company give some direction to their team And I can guarantee you, you will have a much better chance of getting the outcomes that you expect down the road. Thank you. Have a great day.